Welcome back everyone. Time to do another video on basically a phone that I've talked about a lot on this channel and a lot in this year. And that phone is the iPhone 7. Now, I've made it 2 videos, at least 2 big reviews this year. I've made like probably 50 videos this year about it. But a very interesting thing that I saw is, first of all, that narrative of like, oh, like an older phone, nobody cares, this or that. Really, anytime I talk about an older phone, especially for the iPhone 7, and I'll get to that in a second, a lot of people are curious because less and less people are upgrading their phones every single year when the older generation phones are still supported, but on top of that, still perform on an everyday basis perfectly fine for a majority of people out there. Now, with the iPhone 7, something that was really funny about it was that this year, surprisingly for my iOS 14 reviews that I do on basically every phone that comes out, the iPhone 7 I think got the most amount of views than any other phone for that I reviewed. And I reviewed newer phones than it, I reviewed older phones than it, and this one I think got the most amount of views, at least most for like a short amount of time. And that's something that's really, really interesting about this phone, because you would think an iPhone 7, oh, it's random, nobody cares about it anymore. But like, why are hundreds of thousands of people still watching these type of videos if, nobody cares? So, and there's probably like millions and millions of views out there just within the last probably like couple months of people talking about the iPhone 7, not just me, but everybody out there, which is really impressive. That means there's a lot of eyes on just this phone. Now, with the iPhone 7, this phone came out in 2016, and some major things have happened. We are about to get those new iPhone 12s that are going to be coming out, but on top of that, we have, iOS 14 that just came out too, and I already talked about it, but that's something that's very important on a phone like this, because visually, it doesn't look like a groundbreaking design anymore. It has that 4.7-inch display. It's not really crazy in any way. It has that home button on the front, kind of chunky bezels. But something that's really interesting beyond iOS 14 about it is the iPhone SE 2020 that just came out. Now, the iPhone SE 2 that came out, that is a $399 phone. Now, on the front, that phone doesn't really look that great when you compare it to something like a Galaxy A51 or a OnePlus Nord. Obviously, it doesn't look as good, but the sales numbers, from what I'm hearing, are tremendous. They're not like, I don't think they're topping iPhone 11, but a lot of people, bought this phone. A lot of people are happy with this device, and that is something that's supposed to be said about the majority of people. I don't think people really care too much about upgrading their phone just for like a design thing. That's kind of for me. I love seeing design improvements, but I think for a majority of people, if it's in their budget, getting an iPhone 7 visually is perfectly fine. And it's said again by the iPhone SE 2, Apple wouldn't make that design and recycle it if people would care and people wouldn't buy the phone. They made that price tag where it was strategically so people would buy it, and that was a very smart thing to do. So I think for a majority of people out there, they probably don't care about the way their phone looks. It's basically just me and people who care about, technology a lot. I think those people probably care more about the design. Now, this phone still has that IP67 dust and water resistance, so you can go up to 1 meter of water for 30 minutes, which that is a really important thing too. Holding this phone in the hand, it still feels like a very good phone. It doesn't feel cheap. I feel like the 6S felt a little bit more expensive. It doesn't have glass on the back, but you do have that single camera setup, which in my opinion really isn't even that bad of a camera. It's a single 12 megapixel lens, and you can do 4K at 30 on it, which I think is tremendous for a lot of people. And even with iOS 14, here's the craziest thing. There are phones from 2016 that were unsupported years ago. This iPhone 7 is still supported with software, and I think it's probably going to get another software version as well, but we are still getting camera features up until this day. We just got that new feature in iOS 14 where you can actually change the resolution of these cameras to whatever we want to. If we're doing 4K at 30, we can do it. This phone taps out of 4K at 30, which is perfectly fine, but that is something that is really impressive. That feature is a small feature, but it's the fact that we're still getting support and the fact that we're still getting those type of features on this phone that is really impressive. Now, the camera itself I think is okay. You have optical image stabilization on it. It's only a single lens, so you can't do any telephoto or ultra wide or anything like that, but I think for the majority of things you're going to do with the camera day to day, I think it really gets the job done. It's not a horrible camera. It's actually kind of a decent camera for a lot of people out there. Funny enough, we still have 12 megapixel sensors on all of the iPhones. That may change with this next generation, but this 12 megapixel sensor on is perfectly fine in my opinion. You have a 7 megapixel front facing camera, and you can do 1080p videos focus on that as well. And I think for a lot of people out there too, that is perfectly fine. I've made, several videos on the iPhone 7 throughout my whole entire life owning it. And I made videos on the 7 Plus, and I used to own the 7 Plus as a main iPhone. And even with that front camera, I think they're almost the same on both. It was a good front-facing camera. Like, I took a lot of selfies. I looked really, really good in those photos. And that was back in like 2017, 2018. And this camera, I still think holds up for sure in 2020. And even in the later part of 2020, it still holds up for sure. Now, moving on to the software side of things, like I said, this thing's software experience is good enough. I think iOS 14 has been kind of a rocky start for sure, but I will say I've installed every single beta on this iPhone 7, and I've installed every single official version on this iPhone 7, and so far it has been a really, really smooth experience for an iPhone 7. I've had a lot of issues with this phone, as I've stated before, I'm not shy to admit it. I've had tons of issues, boot loops, random restarts, random resets, and all that stuff. I had to back up and restore a lot of times. But at the end of the day, for some reason, iOS 14 was a pretty smooth experience. I'm not really too sure why, but I think for a majority of people out there, they are probably in the same boat. But I think when they install iOS 14 and they start using it, I think that's when the problems start to arise. And we're still pretty early to iOS 14. I think by the time I do my, 2020, 2021 review for next year, that's probably going to change a little bit. We'll have a little bit more, information to kind of see if it's better or worse. But I think right now it's off to a rocky start, but I think it'll get better over time. Another huge important thing to keep in mind is that I think it's probably going to get iOS 15 as well. I think probably the 6S and SE and 6S Plus are probably going to go. So I doubt Apple's going to cut the iPhone 7 lifecycle off there too. And there are some other devices, like I think the iPod Touch 7th generation that came out last year, as well as the iPad that came out last year as well, all have the Apple A10 Fusion chip. So I find it weird if Apple were to cut away from that. So that's another important thing to keep in mind. But I think for sure, software-wise, this thing's held up really well. And I think even in the smoothness factor, this thing has held up really well too. Like I said, this thing has the A10 Fusion chip, and it has 2 gigs of RAM. Now, it definitely isn't a crazy amount of RAM on paper, but like I said before, I think Apple does a really good job with managing the amount of RAM that they have on these devices. But on top of that, day to day, it's a smooth phone. I doubt anybody is buying an iPhone 7 or using an iPhone 7 if they need crazy amounts of performance, or if they need a crazy amount of, they're doing this and this and this. I think a lot of people are kind of chilling out with it for sure, and they're okay with, it maybe being taking an extra second to load up something, or if it, slows down here or there. I don't think a majority of people are really freaking out about it too much, but I could be wrong. You can always go for an iPhone 7 Plus that has more RAM, but this performance on this phone has been top tier for a 2016 device. I still think the 6S probably, performs better as a price per dollar standpoint, since it's, an older phone and it's only a little bit slower than the iPhone 7. But I think the iPhone 7 has done a really good job at managing expectations when it comes down to the performance side of things. That might be a weird way to put it. I don't know why I phrased it like that. But I think for, whatever you're going to do with it, the iPhone 7's performance-wise is going to be okay. It's just not going to be the best of the best. It's just not going to be an iPhone 11 Pro competitor. It's going to be an iPhone 7. It's going to be a 4-year-old phone almost. And I think if you can expect that and kind of manage your expectations to that level, I actually don't think it's that bad. And it's actually a pretty smooth experience. Now, iOS 14, once we're like a couple months in, I think it'll change. But I think in terms of the performance, that really pretty much covers it up too. But what good is performance without battery life? Now, this thing has a 1960 milliamp hour battery on its top tier battery life when it's full. Unfortunately, I don't think it's full, so it's probably going to be at like 1500, probably minus. And with iOS 14, again, software has a lot to do with this. It's not amazing, it's definitely going to get you maybe like a day. For me personally, it'll probably give me like 60% through a day, but then I don't have to charge it after. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But I think for a majority of people out there, I think you're going to be perfectly okay with this type of battery life if you're carrying around a charger. And since we're all at home, I think it's okay. But if you're out and about and you're away from a charger and all that stuff, it may die on you depending on how much you use your phone. Me personally, I go on TikTok, I go on Snapchat, Twitter, all that stuff. So my phone tends to die. With my 11 Pro, it's actually pretty good at battery life, and I'm usually ending the day at around like 50%. But I could see how I would probably end the day on an iPhone 7 at like 10%, maybe, probably even less than that. And I would probably have to charge it before it, fully dies. So in terms of the battery department, that really pretty much covers it up there. And to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, how has the iPhone 7 held up in the later part of 2020 and whether it's still worth picking up. And I can tell you, without a doubt, if you're in the market, you have like $100 to spend, maybe $120 to spend, maybe getting an iPhone 7 is a decent way to go. I don't think it's a horrible device. iOS 14 has actually changed my opinion on this a lot. I personally have updated a lot of phones throughout my life, and almost every single time I updated them, I've always ran into issues on the iPhone 7. This time around, on all my iPhone 7s, including the 7 Plus, I didn't run into any issues, which was really surprising. So maybe Apple changed something in their backend that made it so iPhone 7s are loved again, I don't know. But that was something that was really, really interesting to me. But I think as a daily phone, if you're somebody who doesn't really require too many resources, if you're just kind of using a phone just to text and call people, and you're not really using Snapchat or going through and like using your phone to its full capacity, then I think an iPhone 7 is not a bad way to go. It has a good screen. Apple's still selling pretty much the same screen, so it's not really a problem there. You have a pretty good build quality. If you drop it, it's probably not going to break, but parts that fix this phone aren't really that expensive. It has a decent camera too, which is really good. You have IP certification, so a little bit of rugged proof there. I think the main problems with this phone are probably with the reliability. Maybe if there's still some issues there, if it factory resets on you or something, that's an issue. Also the battery life, it's not really that good. Like I said, depending on your use, it may get you through a day, it may not. For me, it probably wouldn't, but doesn't mean it will happen to you. So that's another really important thing to keep in mind. But I think if you want, get it, but I would still probably recommend getting an iPhone 8. I think the iPhone 8 is probably one of the better phones you can pick up, in my opinion, for that price tag. So that really pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.